Okay, imagine if Jeff Bezos vanished from the modern internet. No memes of his transformation from nerd to Hulk, no tweets about his morning puttering routine, no digital history at all. Now, that's not the case for Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, but it is the case for Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, on the Chinese internet. We are at a pivotal moment in our relationship with information, power, and value mediated by our technologies. And increasingly, our digital past is eroding. Now, Jack Ma is not the only thing that has disappeared online. The Chinese language internet is rapidly collapsing. In fact, pretty much all content predating the emergence of the mobile internet is already gone. That includes earthquake coverage, local news, historical events. And we only really know about that in part because a Chinese blogger who covers famous individuals like Jack Ma wrote a piece in May of this year documenting that when he ran a search with sort of the parameters from 1998 to 2005, where you would expect to read a lot about Jack Ma, he only came back with one search result, and it was an erroneous one at that. Now, the only reason we actually know this is because, unfortunately, the blog post was scrubbed by Chinese content moderators and thankfully was captured by the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. So the Internet Archive is a US nonprofit that saves different websites for posterity. And it doesn't really end there. The sort of content monitoring and scrubbing, that's really just one reason that our internet is vulnerable today and our past is eroding. We're also facing a lot of link rot. I'll walk you through some of these numbers. This is mostly from a study that came out from the Pew Research Center. And they say that over a quarter of websites that existed between 2013 and 2023 no longer exist. They're no longer available. 23% of news pages contain at least one broken link, and 21% of government web pages contain a broken link. 54% of Wikipedia pages in the reference section have a broken link, meaning they point to a citation that's no longer available. In a separate study that's about scholarly journal articles and the sort of preservation archiving of journal material, 2 million articles are no longer available or incorrectly preserved out of about 7 million that they studied. This is sometimes called a KT boundary of information. It's a term that suggests the extinction of information from one era to the next, analogous to the distinction between the Cretaceous and the Tertiary periods in geology, which separated the age of dinosaurs from the age of mammals. So a time of great informational extinction. And ultimately, if we don't work on knowledge integrity at many levels today, we face a future where the verification of historical knowledge and data is challenging, if not impossible. So far I'm telling you this story that we're losing a lot of information, and we are, but clearly since 2022, we are also experiencing an onslaught of new information. With the rise of generative AI, I'm sure all of you have experienced and even used AI-generated images, text, video, even podcasts. We're seeing AI-generated ads, and it's really coming from everywhere. Some people even believe that about 90% of information online will be AI-generated in just a few short years. So we're shifting the balance of knowledge creation. And it doesn't matter really where you stand on how close or far we are to artificial general intelligence or superintelligence. We all have to admit and acknowledge that we have new agents in our midst, and they are high-level content generators. And this is true also in our organizations. We're seeing it filter down. So a recent study by McKinsey, their global AI survey, 65% of respondents said that their organization is regularly using generative AI. And that's double the number from just 10 months ago. These deep learning models are trained on web-scale data sets. And so they're trained largely on the internet. Even OpenAI transcribed something like 1 million hours of YouTube videos to train GPT-4. But they're still looking for more data. So all of the model generators today are hunting for and trying to drive licensing deals for original content and different forms of data, whether it's visual, audio, text, et cetera. And to combat that, we're seeing some interesting and maybe not so pleasant tactics. A lot of different websites are ensuring that their terms of service have anti-scraping mechanisms in them, and they're even doing different tactics. So there have been a lot of research now on data poisoning, where folks will essentially manipulate the data and ensure that if it gets scraped, it's actually not particularly useful. And that's understandable. I mean, they want to be compensated for their data or have consent over that agreement. However, it also means we're sort of facing a decline in what we can think of as the AI data commons. And so if AIs are scraping an internet that doesn't represent actual data sets, we can see that that might go poorly. So I've already said that we're sort of heading towards this future where there's more AI content online than human. And then also people are pursuing these data poisoning techniques. Another concern is that we could face what's called model collapse, where essentially because LLMs are continuously being trained on the internet, they could be trained on their own outputs and sort of devolve into really ineffective tools because they're sort of incestuously consuming their own data and creating a lot of errors. Now, there is a separate category of synthetic data, which is quite interesting. That's more about the ability to use AI model-generated data to run simulations or other kinds of trials that we wouldn't actually be able to do based on the kind of data we collect today. But we've all seen examples of sort of poor AI outcomes, right? The one that most people seem to enjoy is Google's AI overviews tool, which synthesizes an answer to your query instead of delivering a ranked search result, gave the answer to the question, how do you keep cheese on pizza? And its answer was using non-toxic glue, which is a terrible answer, and anybody would know that, but obviously it's not a commonly queried question on the internet, and so there was very little data or information that the model could use to answer. So we're increasingly seeing some concerns. So what is the role of Web3 in this era of a fragile internet and the rise of AI? There was an Economist article not too long ago that said artificial intelligence has had almost no economic impact so far. And I loved Goon's response, which was, people have said this about the internet, they said it about blockchain, and now they are saying it about AI. You'd think at some point they would learn. And I think this is fundamentally true. Web3 and AI actually are bold expansions of how we codify, transfer, and make meaning out of information. And together, they actually offer us some tooling to rebalance the architecture of our internet and pave a different path forward. So all of you probably know this, but I'll go through it anyway. There's many reasons to think about Web3 and blockchains as the architectural underpinning of our future economy and an economy based on AI. One is certainly identities. Blockchains are good for identities of people, of companies, of communities, of agents, of software. These identities can be verifiable, they can be self-sovereign, they can be pseudonymous. Blockchains are also very good at transactions. We all enjoy instant global payments and the ability to transfer our assets seamlessly. That also includes the ability to codify and tokenize different forms of value. They are good at marketplaces. There's certainly traditional marketplaces that we've seen in the trading of tangible and intangible goods, but they're also good at things like prediction marketplaces, which are increasingly being used, or reputation marketplaces. So incentive mechanisms built in and played out in large scale. They're good for coordination, so whether it's consensus and consensus-driven decision-making, or the coordination of software through smart contracts and code. They're very good at verification, which is increasingly important as we look at AI outputs and the tools that we have grown in Web3 over the last decade in terms of zero-knowledge proofs, and of course, all the other ways that we do timestamps and verification. And finally, persistence. I think this one gets overlooked often, but the ability to have tamper-proof code as well as a composable architecture upon which you can build and mix and match tooling is really important. It's why we didn't see a lot of innovation on top of Web 2 platforms. We didn't have the ability to have persistent APIs. So that gives us a lot greater flexibility for an economy built with AI. This is a little provocative. You've probably seen something similar. Balaji wrote something about this, and other people have come up with different examples. You probably have some of your own. But you could argue that each of these fields needs the other. For Web3, we really see benefit from AI in terms of its user interface and just sort of making it a more, hopefully, user adoption growth mechanism. And then the reverse, when we look at AI, there's a lot of the scary things about AI that we can mitigate through crypto and Web3. So a few examples: AI generates, crypto authenticates. AI is opaque, crypto is verifiable. AI needs governance, crypto is and offers sovereign code. If we look at the AI stack itself today, this is an image that was generated by the Public AI Network, which is sort of a growing coalition. And it kind of breaks it down into vertical end-to-end platforms. That's where we would see an OpenAI or an Anthropic. And then horizontal platforms that are tackling different pieces of AI activity. So whether it's compute or training data or the model itself. And when you look at this kind of picture or you think about the AI tech stack broadly, you can also evaluate it with a few lenses. So you can think about whether activities are open or closed. And that's kind of a confusing framing today, because on the one hand, we certainly know of closed projects. OpenAI is a great example. And yet we also have open source projects, or projects that claim to be open source, like Llama, that are really benefiting the sort of open source AI initiative. But even OSI, which defines usually the terminology around what is open source, has basically said that Llama doesn't fit the definition fully of open source. There are parts of their architecture that are not open. So we can talk about open or closed. We can talk about public or private. There are different public initiatives going on in AI. Although we hear mostly about the private ones, there's certainly scientific efforts going on from different governments. And then we can think about the horizontal and the vertical, which is depicted here. So we can sort of have a similar conversation when we look at what's already happening in the intersection of Web3 and AI. We have sort of three loose approaches. The first is a group of projects that are pursuing really these vertical AI platforms, so fully on-chain. And some believe that's not possible, others clearly do, and there's a number of projects in that space. Some of the folks at Dfinity are pursuing that. Open Gradient just launched, they seem to be pursuing that. The second category is taking that sort of horizontal view and basically just saying all the activities we're going to do in a Web3 decentralized manner. So we're going to decentralize compute, we're going to decentralize training, we're going to decentralize inference, we're going to decentralize storage, or any of those types of layers. And that also, we should say, like, there's a lot of activities in that in those layers that have existed for a long time, right? We've had decentralized storage projects in the Web3 space for quite some time, predating generative AI's rise. And then the last category is a little bit of a catch-all, but is a bit of that depiction where we say, okay, Web3 is the front end, and Web3 is the back end, and AI is the front end. And we get sort of optimization of existing projects, debugging of code, and auditing, predictions of vulnerabilities, improved user interface, and chatbots, and things like that. This is a very, very small sample size of the kinds of projects you could already be tracking. But we're seeing lots of activity at every layer. So there's several on here that are for decentralized compute. There's several doing decentralized inference. There's several doing things like indexing. The graph is one of those that's been around a long time. LivePeer's been around a while too and has been doing decentralized video encoding and transcoding, but now offers its own AI video subnet. There are application layer projects. If you haven't tried Venice.ai, I suggest you try it and compare it to your results from, say, ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of the others. That's a project by Eric Voorhees, who's been a veteran crypto founder for a really long time. So we're seeing some really interesting, viable experiments and projects already. And if we start to imagine this shift towards AI in our economy, we have to also consider an AI to AI set of transactions and where that is going. Brian Armstrong from Coinbase posted this recently, that they performed their first AI to AI crypto transaction. And in some ways, it fulfills sort of a long-standing hope in our space in Web3, where we used to talk about, oh, we want a future where robots with wallets are the next consumer class, right? That this is an economic rails that makes sense for software and its users because it is written in code, as opposed to requiring a bank account or any other sort of human onboarding. So yeah, we're seeing lots of progress in terms of the kinds of AI to AI interactions that are going to be possible and what that economy might build out. But I want to sort of zoom out a little bit and talk briefly about when we think about AI infusing our world and our economy, we don't want to leave behind this infusion into our public sphere, right? And there's an article that just came out, my friend Marcy Harris published, of PopVox saying China's gifts of parliament buildings in Africa are a wake-up call for digital sovereignty. And she documented, literally, there are 15 parliament buildings across Africa that were funded, built, and are continuously maintained by China today, including their digital infrastructure. And in a world where we're sort of seeing countries race to participate in AI dominance, it's going to be increasingly important to have public infrastructure and rails that you can have sovereignty over, and have sovereignty over your data and your own nation's activities. So it's important to keep in mind what public looks like in this future. So we're getting some folks that are paying a lot of attention to that. OSI, as I said, is one group that reformulates the definition for what open source is, and they literally, within the last year, just did the definition drafting for what is open source for AI. Like, what does that mean to be an open source project. I highly recommend you take a look at it. We have the Public AI Network, which launched. They wrote a white paper defining what public AI is. Vanderbilt's Policy Accelerator wrote a piece that basically says public infrastructure and a public tech stack for AI is a national security imperative, and no mention of Web3 in that. And then just this month, Mozilla also came out with its own public AI piece, really positing it as the future of Mozilla. So we're in a very pivotal moment where our knowledge creation and capture is kind of up in the air, and we might end up with a system that is sort of Web 2, super powered by AI, or hopefully what my call to action is for all of you is to really ensure that Web 3 is the destination for AI projects, and that we have a choice in the kind of infrastructure we use going forward. Thank you so much.